Hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Ashley. I am a mom of 5 girls. I'm currently pregnant with the 5th. I'm actually 24 weeks pregnant, but I thought it was a perfect time to share with you my labor and delivery story with my first baby girl. Now my older 3 are my stepdaughters, and then I have a 1-year-old going on 13 months, and I'm currently pregnant. So I thought it'd be a perfect time to share with you how my labor and delivery went with my firstborn. And especially right now that I'm a little over halfway through my pregnancy, it's kind of nice going back and remembering what happened with that labor and delivery, what I liked and what I didn't, what I want to do differently this time. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, before I even get into my labor and delivery story, I do want to mention that however you decide to have your baby is your choice. I get it, you plan as much as you want and sometimes things don't go as you wanted, but I'm saying more so if you decide you want an epidural from the very beginning, if you decide you want a C-section, you want to be induced, whatever your choice is, just know that it's okay and no one has to tell you otherwise. I personally decided to do unmedicated because my mom had actually had 5 kids unmedicated. My grandmother had 8 kids unmedicated, and I knew that if both of them could do it, I could do it. And if you have anyone that had an epidural and you decide, you know what, I want to have an unmedicated birth, but I don't know if I could do it because my mom and my grandma and everyone I know of had an epidural, just know that you can still try for that unmedicated birth, whether you know someone that had it or not. Do your research like I did. The moment I found out I was pregnant, I knew right away I want an unmedicated birth. So I did the research. I bought the books. I read online. I listened to podcasts. I wrote down everything that I knew I would need to prepare to have an unmedicated birth. So don't feel intimidated if that's what you want and you don't know anyone else that does. So I will say that if you take anything from this video as far as, tips for your delivery, which I think I'm going to make a separate video on all the things that I did to help me have this unmedicated birth. But one thing I do want to share that I feel really contributed to having my unmedicated birth was drinking red raspberry leaf tea. Now it has to be red raspberry leaf tea. It can't just be red leaf tea or something. I think I found an alternative, but that is not the one that you need to be drinking. I found an organic one online, which I can link below, but that is not to be, you're not supposed to start drinking that until, I think I started at about 34, 35 weeks. And you slowly start drinking, you start with like 1 cup and then 2 cups and 3 cups at that point, once you're reaching towards the end of your pregnancy. But I really feel like that's what helped me contract as strong as I did so quickly. And I'm not necessarily saying it was more painful. I just feel like the contractions were getting me somewhere. They were strong. I'll have to tell you in a minute as far as how long it took me to have this baby, but I will say that my midwife freaked out knowing that it was my first and I progressed so quickly. So again, if you have not heard of red raspberry leaf tea, you have to look into it. That is definitely what I feel helped me to have this unmedicated birth. So let's go ahead and get into my birth story now that I went on that long tangent. So I think I was about 38 weeks and maybe 5 days when I went in for a checkup. She wanted to check how far I was dilated, and then she wanted to do a membrane sweep. Now, before she even got started with checking me, I told her I don't want to do a membrane sweep. I really want this to come naturally. Let's just go ahead and wait. I'll wait another week, and if nothing has progressed, then I'll just go ahead and have the membrane sweep. So she said, okay, I'll go ahead and check you then. Well, I think she ended up doing the membrane sweep anyways because it was painful. It's not that it was painful like I couldn't take it, but it was, to me, a little more painful than checking for dilation should have been. So she checked me. I definitely felt like she kind of like scraped in there or something, and I think that's what she was doing. I didn't confirm, which I should have looking back, but I did not. But after checking me, she did tell me that I was already at 4 centimeters, which she was in shock because, being my first, she just was like, okay, you're at a 4. Do you feel anything? And I said, no, I don't feel any pain. I feel pressure down there when I'm walking, or at the end of the day, I'll feel pressure, but I wasn't necessarily feeling pain. I would feel Braxton Hicks, which I had been feeling since, a few months or a few weeks before, but I wasn't feeling pain necessarily. So she said, okay, we'll go ahead and wait. And if you don't go into labor within the next week, we'll go ahead and check you again and see where you're at. And then at that point, if you reach the 40, you're still at 4, we'll go ahead and either induce you or get you checked into the hospital. So I said, okay, let's just hope, you know, I was praying that I would go into labor before having to get to that point. So this was 38 and 5 days or so. Well, when I hit 39 weeks, I remember I was actually clipping my toenails on the bed. My husband was at work, and it had to have been about maybe 4:45 or so, almost 5, because he was just about to get out of work. And I just heard this loud pop, like a balloon popped. And then I just felt like water trickling down my legs while I was clipping my toenails. And I'm like, okay, was that my water that just broke? So I stood up thinking I had peed myself at first. And so I stand up, and then all this water just starts coming down my legs. I mean, it was a lot of water. And I knew at that point, okay, I did not just pee myself. I definitely had my water break. So I went to the restroom, and I immediately called my husband first instead of calling my midwife. And he's like, what? Okay, call your midwife and see what she says. See if we need to go in. I'm on my way right now, coming home from work. So sure enough, I give her a call, and she tells me, okay, so your water broke. Let's just go ahead and give it a few hours, see if anything starts up. And then if it does, go ahead and come into the hospital. So I said, okay, I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll see if anything starts. If anything, I can start laboring here at home. So I asked her, when should I go in? And she started, you know, to say when it starts, what did she say? Your contractions are 5 minutes apart for 1 hour, I believe it was. Oh, lasting a minute for 1 hour. It was called like the 511 or something. So she calls me back about maybe 30 minutes later and says, hey, has anything started? Have you felt any sort of contractions? I said, no. You know, I felt a little bit weird with, it just felt like less pressure on my stomach, but I didn't quite feel pain. So she said, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and have you start coming. We'll go ahead and have you start heading this way at about 8. So I said, okay, I'll head that way at about 8 p.m. So water broke at about 5, and at 8, I was to head to the hospital. So by that time, I got my bags ready. My husband got home. My mom, she came with us. So I said, you know what? I'm getting hungry. I want to eat before I even get to the hospital, because I know I won't be able to eat anything. I'll kind of munch on a few things here and there, but I won't be able to eat food. So I actually stopped at a barbecue place nearby the hospital and had a brisket sandwich before going in. And I remember getting to the hospital, and the midwife said, we're not going to check you. I don't want to have any sort of risk for infection, so we're not going to check you just yet. You're already at a 4 when I checked you the last few days, so let's go ahead and just let you labor. She said, it's your first baby, so you're probably not going to have this baby till tomorrow night. So I said, okay, you know, just kind of labor here and try to see what I can do to get things started. She goes, take your time. She goes, just be patient. You know, I don't really foresee you having this baby today. She goes, but I do have to mention that I'm actually going on a flight at 5 in the morning to California. So if you don't have this baby, she goes, no pressure, but if you don't have this baby before I leave, unfortunately, you will have to have the baby with the OB or the doctor that's on call. And so right away, I was like, what? You know, I saw this midwife my whole pregnancy, and then for her to tell me last minute that she was possibly going to go on this flight, I just remember being in tears when she walked out, telling my husband, I have to have this baby before she leaves. So by this point, I want to say it was about 10:30, and I still wasn't really feeling any sort of contractions. I felt pressure, but not really much pain or anything really happening. So my husband said, you know what, why don't you lay down and get some rest so you can be prepared for when you start having the contractions, you can get through it. So I said, you're right, let me go ahead and lay down and we'll go from there. So we turned off all the lights, and I laid down, and I finally fell asleep maybe around 11. And when I kind of was in and out, because I just felt like pressure and just like something was starting to happen, but I wasn't still feeling pain. It was just pressure, uncomfortable. So then I was kind of awake, and my husband at this point was asleep. I didn't want to wake him. So I just remember just praying. I was just praying. And one thing I did not mention was my whole pregnancy, I had been listening to the audiobook Supernatural Childbirth. And if you have not heard of this book on Audible, I really recommend it if you are a Christian, or if you do believe in the power of prayer, I do recommend you reading this book, because I do feel like this also helped me get through it. I played it every chance that I got. I'd put my earbuds in, whether I was cleaning or at work or any time that I had a chance. I'd listen to it, and I would just tell myself, you know, my body was made for this, and I know I can get through this, and I'm gonna have a healthy baby, and just, you have to listen to it to know what I mean. But at this time, it was already probably close to midnight, and I just started praying. I just started praying that my body would know what to do. I started praying that my baby knew what to do, and that I was gonna start contracting, that I would dilate quickly, and just all these different things that I kept telling myself to get through this and to get it started. So I closed my eyes, finally fell asleep. I want to say it had been about 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden I just felt this like this loud, or I actually heard it, like this loud noise in my body or something, that I knew something had started. And at that point, looking back now, obviously I know that the baby had actually, they call it getting into the basket case, where they kind of fall into place to get started going through the birth canal. But immediately I felt that hit, and I stood up, like I popped up, and I was like, what was that? And my husband woke up, and he was like, what happened? Are you okay? And I said, I think I'm about to start having contractions. I think the baby's coming. He's like, okay, should I call somebody? I said, no, let's just see if I start having contractions. Okay. So then I started kind of walking around. He said, let's go walk through the halls, and maybe that'll help you. I said, okay. So we started walking, and then walking back to the room, I had my first contraction. I had no idea what it was. It felt like Braxton Hicks, and I said, okay, this could be Braxton Hicks, or it could be a contraction. So it was still bearable. So I could still walk, I could still talk through the contraction. And then, maybe 30 minutes later, I started to feel when they were coming on. So I could feel when it was about to start, and I'd kind of have to stop. And then it got to the point where I was having them maybe every 5 minutes, and they were starting to get a little stronger, a little more intense. And again, still not painful. They were still very bearable. And I had my birthing ball that I took with me. So every time I'd feel a contraction coming, I'd kind of kneel on the floor, and I would kind of rest over my birthing ball, and I would just kind of sway through it. And I don't think I ever contracted on the bed. Every contraction that I had, I was standing up on the birthing ball, squatting on all fours. I never once laid down. And I think that was another thing that helped, was getting your body moving, getting my body moving. And I think that's what helped me progress faster. So I started noticing that they were coming more frequently. They were starting to get more intense, still not painful, very bearable, but definitely noticeable. So at this point, my husband started noticing that I couldn't talk through contractions. This must have been about maybe 2 a.m. by this point. And I was having to stop. I was having to definitely squat down. I'd sway. And I had Christian music playing in the background, so I'd kind of focus on that, and I'd kind of just picture my baby physically moving down and just helping me get through the contractions and helping to push the baby down. So at this point, it was probably closer to 3 a.m. already when I started to feel them more intense. The nurse kept coming in. She was checking the baby's heart rate. Everything was fine. I just remember that they were already getting to like 3 minutes apart, and I told her, I said, they're getting more intense and they're closer. And she's like, oh, you're fine. The midwife said you should be having this baby till tomorrow. I think you're just fine. If they start getting a little closer where they're 2 minutes apart and it's more frequent, then maybe we'll go ahead and check you. And I looked at my husband and I was like, okay, something's happening, and I don't think they believe me. So then, he's like, okay, let's just see if they get more intense. If they get closer, then we'll go ahead and call the midwife, or the nurse to call the midwife. And I said, yeah, I'll just wait. So then at this point, I was having to moan. I was already kind of moaning, but this time I was really having to focus on my contractions. And I was starting to get them every 2 minutes. And so my husband said, you know what, let me call the midwife, or the nurse. Let me see if she can call a midwife to come in to check you. And I said, we'll call them, and we'll see what she says. So she comes in and she tells me, no, you're still fine. You know, I think that we'll just go ahead and wait a little bit longer. And if anything, the midwife lives only 2 minutes away. So let's just go ahead and keep having you contract. And, you know, things are definitely progressing, but I don't feel like you've reached that point yet where we need to call the midwife. I wanted to punch the lady. I remember thinking, trying to tell my husband to tell her something, you know, and it was just funny because I just thought, okay, this girl is not believing me. Like, what do I need to do? Do I need to scream? Because she even told me, I still see like your face, you know, you don't seem like you're in that much pain, which I wasn't in a lot of pain, but I definitely could feel like this was progressing. I could feel the contractions. I could feel the squeezing around my stomach. They felt a lot like period cramps, but intense period cramps. So I said, fine. You know, she walked out and I went into the bath. They didn't have a bathtub, so it was a shower, actually a stand-up shower. So I told my husband, you know what, let's try to put some water on my back, because it was, at that point my back was starting to just hurt, and just this dull ache on my back. So he was putting water on my back, and you know, through the contraction I'd kind of just sit there and he would put the water, and then the water just started to not feel comfortable. Which is ironic because I actually wanted to have a water birth, and I'm so glad I did not, because I don't think that would have worked for me for my first birth. So I went ahead and came back to the room, and I continued to contract, and at this point they were starting to come back to back. And I said, okay, call the nurse, please. Between the contractions, like I had maybe 20 seconds between each, I said, call her, because I do feel like I'm getting close. And at that point, I was already starting to tell him, you know, I can't do this. Should I just get the epidural? And he's like, no, you were so set on getting this. Unless you really, really need it, I will let them know. But let's just find out how far along you are first. So I said, fine. And, you know, I was trying to get through them. So then the nurse comes in and she goes, maybe I should check you now, because I do see like you are a little further along. And again, I wanted to just punch her. I know that's so mean, but I just was in a lot of... not necessarily pain again. I don't know how to explain it. It was just, I was very focused, and I did not want to lose that focus, and she was just getting me very angry, and I just wanted to scream at her and just tell her, get the midwife here. So she says, you know what, let me call the other nurse and we'll go ahead and check you, and then if you're far along enough, then we'll go ahead and call the midwife. She's only 2 minutes away, she said again, and I was like, okay, fine, check me. So she lays me down. This is the first time that I lay back on the bed since I started laboring. So then I lay down, and she goes, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and check you. And I'm like, okay, like hurry up. So she checks me, and her eyes looked the size of softballs. I mean, she just froze, and she looks at the other nurse and she says, she's complete. And I said, what? And she goes, I'm gonna go ahead and call the midwife, and we're gonna go ahead and get her here as quickly as possible. Just don't push. And I said, what do you mean don't push? She goes, well, you're 10 centimeters already. And I'm like, what? I'm 10 centimeters already? So then she says, just go ahead and stay here and don't push. She'll be here quickly. And I look at my husband, he goes, if you need to push, you push. Don't force your body to stop pushing. So within maybe 10 to 15 seconds, I remember her walking out. And I actually, before I mentioned what I'm about to tell you, I remember looking at the clock, and it was already 4 a.m. So she gets here, and so then the nurse leaves, and then within like 10 to 15 seconds after she closes the door, I just remember this pain that hit within like a second on my back. And within a second, it felt as if my back was breaking in half. I was in so much pain. And I just remember at this point, I yelled, and I remember it scared me. And I kind of lost my focus because it scared me that bad that this pain just hit like out of nowhere. And I remember yelling and saying, my back. And I was telling my husband, my back. And he's like, so then the nurse had me get on all fours on the bed. And she starts telling my husband to help to massage my back. And she says, I think she might be going, she might have back labor. So then all of a sudden, I just couldn't take it. I could not take it. I was screaming at this point, saying my back. I mean, it was upsetting because I got through the contractions all the way to 10, very well. And then all of a sudden, I just started getting back labor towards the end. So then the midwife gets here, sure enough, within 5 minutes or so. And she says, you made it to 10. I really didn't think. And I'm trying to hear her and I'm thinking, shut up, lady, just help me get this baby out. So then I tell her, I'm still yelling my back, and she goes, oh, sweetie, it looks like you do have back labor. This baby must be hitting your nerve on your, the baby must be coming out the wrong way. So typically babies come down, they come face down. And then when they're about to come out, then they turn the other way. So my baby was coming face up, which means her skull was hitting my back and my spine. So then she's like, the only way to relieve this pressure is if you push the baby out. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So she had me pushing on all fours at that point. And then I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, I'm gonna die. Like, my back is not gonna last this. I don't know what to do. So then my husband's still trying to massage. At that point, I'm just sweating buckets, and he starts putting the fan. I bought this little portable fan. He's putting on my face, and I'm still yelling at this point, my back. And so she's like, come on, you've got to push. And so it's when I was pushing through each contraction, she started to see the head of the baby. So she says, you know what, let's go ahead and turn you. Let's get the squat bar and let's have you squat, because it doesn't look like you're doing very well on all fours. So let's turn you around. And I just kept telling her, I can't. And she's like, yes, you can. You've come this far. Turn around. Let's get you on a squat position and let's get this baby out. So then I'm squatting on the bed with the squat bar. And as the next contraction comes, I remember that I started to feel this like burning sensation, and now I know it's called the ring of fire. I did not know about this at that time. And I just remember yelling my back, and at the same time I was yelling it hurts and it's burning. And she's like, yes, that's very normal. The baby's coming out, the baby's already crowning. We need you to push, your baby's almost out. So my husband is trying to encourage me as well and telling me, you can do it. And I might have said some things at that point that weren't so nice to everybody in that room, but you know what? I apologized at the end and told them I don't even remember what I said. So then this next part is a little hazy, because obviously the pain and just everything that was going on, I was trying to focus on just getting the baby out, so I can't remember every single detail. But I do remember that in one contraction where I was about to get the head out, my knees, for whatever reason, like I had like my legs jolted, and like my knees kind of tried to come together and try to close. And one side my husband pulled and the midwife pulled the other side, and they both yelled and said, no, you're gonna squish the baby. And so they pulled my legs open, and at that point, from then on, they were just holding my legs open. So about 2 or 3 more contractions, the baby finally came out, and she had a short umbilical cord, so she rested her on my belly. And I kid you not, the pain was gone. Like gone, completely gone. It was as if nothing had ever happened. My back was just fine. And I just remember crying and thinking, I did that. Like, I just did that. I remember telling myself that I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can have an unmedicated birth. Maybe I'll just do the epidural. I'll just go the easy way, I just didn't know that I had it in me to do that. And when I saw my baby laying on my stomach and she looked up at me crying, I just remember thinking, this was all worth it. Like, I would do this over again just to see my baby for the first time. Sorry. So she told me you did have a 1st-degree tear, which is just the skin. There's no muscle, which is great for your first baby. Again, I was in shock, and sorry, I'm just kind of still remembering all of the emotions that it brought me when I saw my baby for the first time. And I remember they laid me back. My husband went ahead and cut the cord for me. We waited about 5-10 minutes before he cut the cord, and then she just was laying on my chest. We immediately did skin to skin, and my husband did skin to skin, and it was beautiful. I just remember thinking, I did this. I felt so empowered. I felt like Wonder Woman. I just felt amazing. And so they, I do remember that I had an IV port in. I did not get the IV, but they wanted me to have it in just in case. I just remember them telling me that it was precautionary just in case I lost a lot of blood or something. But I do remember that I was holding the baby and I saw them putting something in my IV, in the IV port, and my husband asked, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, it's just to help her." I don't remember what they said. It's just to help her contract for the placenta to come out or something. So at that point, I didn't even fight it. Again, I don't know what they put. I should have asked now thinking back, but I do know that it took about 20 minutes for the placenta to come out. I didn't even feel it. And honestly, I was in so much shock, and to be honest, just a little bit traumatized, if I'm being honest. I think more so from the back pain than anything. I just remember, I think they asked me, "Do you want to see the placenta?" And I said no. I didn't even want to think about it. And looking back, I wish I had, just because, but I didn't see it. I just wanted to hold my baby and just lay there, and she stitched me up, and again, it was just a 1-degree tear, so it didn't really bother me. And they went ahead and transported me to the, I think it's called the postpartum room or something. It's when they take you, after you've given birth, they take you to another room and make it a little more comfortable, if you will, for you. So yeah, that was it. And then after that, the one thing that did bug me a bit is that we ended up staying 2 days longer than we should have. And the reason for that was because they were concerned that my baby had jaundice, and after them showing the levels to us, it seems as if she was close to borderline. It wasn't necessarily that she had jaundice or that it was even a huge risk of her having it. But you know what, it's better to be safe than sorry. So as frustrated as we were, as much as we wanted to get home, we just stuck it out. And the one thing that was really getting me frustrated was that I just couldn't get sleep. I wanted to sleep when the baby slept, and I couldn't, because nurses just kept coming in, checking me, checking what my pressure was, and just I get why they have to do that. But at that point, I just wanted just to be alone with my husband and my baby. I wanted everybody to just leave us alone. And at one point, one of the nurses that came to check me asked if it was okay that she brought in I think she was someone that was going to school to be a nurse or something, and she just wanted to see the process, and it was kind of like a class. And she was like, "Is it okay if they come in to see the process and all of that?" And my husband looks at her and says, "No, please leave us alone for a while, please." "Okay," she says, "Okay, that's fine." So she steps out, and I felt bad afterwards. I was running on like hours of sleep from the past 48 hours. So there was no way that, I wanted anyone else coming into our room at that point. But other than that, that's my whole birth story. I'd love for you to share your birth story with me. This was the most beautiful experience, and yet painful. I mean, and not even the contractions. That's what I was telling my mom, was it freaked me out that I was able to get through the contractions all the way to 10, and it was the back labor that got me. And she told me, she goes, "That's a funny thing you say that, Ashley, because out of all 5 births, you were the one that gave me back labor." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah." And it's funny, it's not funny, she said, but it's crazy to think that I had back labor with you, and then you had back labor with your first baby. So I'm really hoping that with this pregnancy, I do not get back labor. I know that there are positions that you can do before going into birth that helps turn the baby. So one thing I forgot to mention was, throughout my whole pregnancy, my baby's butt was on my right side. I don't know if this is sort of like an old wives' tale or what it is, but my midwife did mention that typically when the baby's butt is on the right side, you do tend to have back labor, and typically the baby's butt should be on the left side. Now, I don't know if this is an old wives' tale, like I mentioned, but I did have the baby's butt on the right side the whole pregnancy, and I did have back labor. So thankfully this pregnancy, every time that I've gone to get checked, I ask, "Where's the baby's butt?" And they kind of laughed, and I tell them, they'll laugh, and I'll tell them the story as to why. But sure enough, this baby's butt has been on the left. So let's just hope it stays that way. And if ever she turns or something, then I will do these exercises that I have found online to kind of help turn her the other way. But that's it for my labor and delivery. I'm excited to go through it again. I'm nervous. I'm just feeling all sorts of emotions, but I thought it was a perfect time to just share it with you all, to let you know how mine went, and I'd love to hear yours. Let me know how yours went. Send me a message, send me an email, whatever it is, and just know that your birth is your birth, not your mom's, not your midwife's, not your anyone, not any of your friends. This is your birth. This is going to be your story. If you are currently pregnant and you are about to go into labor, or if you're halfway through pregnancy, whatever, wherever you are in your pregnancy, just know that you can do this. Your body was made to do this. If you're feeling, intimidated by an unmedicated birth, but it's really what you really want, don't give up. Try your hardest to prepare. Yes, it doesn't always go as planned, but try to prepare for it. And I wish you the best of luck. I wish myself luck, because I am currently 24 weeks pregnant. So I want to try again for an unmedicated birth, but I wish you the best of luck again. Thank you so much for watching. But just know that you are not alone. If you need that extra push, if you need the motivation, if you need those inspiring words, reach out to me. I'd love to go through this with you. I'd love to help you prepare. I'd love to be bump buddies, whatever. If you're currently where I'm at, or if you're a little behind or a little ahead, let's do this together. Let's get through this together. Let's motivate each other. Let's inspire each other. Let's do this. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you soon.